Golia was a prosperous gold mining town situated 900 kilometres northeast of Perth. Today it is a ghost town. My father spent the first 12 years of his life here. Conditions were very basic. Walls in these corrugated iron homes were made out of hessian. The local swimming pool provided relief from the heat. Hi, I'm John. In this video, I'll show you part 2 of our Sydney to Western Australia trip. From here, we'll be travelling from Kalgoorlie across to Perth and then anti-clockwise around the bottom part of Western Australia, visiting Busselton, Albany and Esperance. We'll look at charging along the way, which was mostly at DC fast chargers, and also highlights of the journey. The first day in this part of the journey, we left Kalgoorlie for a day trip up to Golia and back. We arrived at Leonora, which is an active town next to the Golia ghost town. In Leonora, we charged using the 3-phase on the side of a public toilet block. This infrastructure has only very recently been put in. With enough charge to get us back to Kalgoorlie, we unplugged and travelled a couple of kilometres to Golia. It was amazing that my father had lived here 80 years ago, and here I was, travelling through in a Tesla. The Golia mine has reopened and is now active again. We travelled back to Kalgoorlie and stayed overnight at a motel that had Tesla destination charges. The next day, the plan was to travel west across to Perth. First though, we did a bit of sightseeing around Kalgoorlie, including visiting the Super Pit. This gold mine is the second largest mine in Australia. We then got on the road to head to Perth. We stopped at Kura Retreat for a top-up charge. We plugged in and went for a walk. The next charge was at Southern Cross, at the Oval. We had to run the cable over the fence to reach the 3-phase. We couldn't quite make it to Perth, so we stopped in at Merredin for a quick top-up at the Tesla destination charges there. Time was getting on, so we ended up staying in a hotel near Perth Airport, which also had a Tesla destination charger. Next day, we went sightseeing around Perth, including visiting Fremantle and also the Botanical Gardens. We overnighted in the Perth beach suburb of Scarborough. In the beach car park, there was a Type 2 AC 22 kilowatt charger. The Tesla Model Y can only charge up to 11 kilowatts on AC. It's bring your own cable here. We charged while we had breakfast. Next part of the journey was Perth down to the surfing location of Yallingup, stopping at Busselton on the way. We have a relative in Busselton, so we ended up staying the night at her place. The next morning, we visited the Busselton jetty. We plugged into the 50 kilowatt DC fast charger in the car park and adventured around the area. We headed off and visited the Cape Naturaliste lighthouse. We also headed underground, exploring the Yallingup cave. We stopped overnight in the Yallingup caravan park. We plugged into the 15 amp socket and set up camp. The next day we travelled to Augusta. First stop was Moore Caves. We visited Jewel Cave and also Lake Cave. We headed to Augusta and overnighted in a motel there. The next day we planned to travel from Augusta across to Albany. I charged at the DC fast charger in Augusta just up from the motel and went and got a coffee over the road. Close by was Cape Lewin Lighthouse. We stopped by for a visit. Then headed east to Walpole. At Walpole, we charged at the new 150 kilowatt DC charger. Very convenient stop here, midway between Augusta and Albany. Just past Walpole, we did the treetop walk. then headed to Albany. We came across this campground about 30 kilometres west of Albany called Shelley Beach. It was amazing. We ended up camping here for 2 nights rather than go to Albany. We had the place to ourselves. Actually, that's not quite true. There were locals about. And we were visited by travellers heading to Antarctica. We packed up camp and said goodbye to Shelley Beach and headed to Albany and then on to Esperance. In Albany, we did a little sightseeing, visiting a couple of spots along the treacherous coastline, as well as the Whaling Station Museum. In town, we charged to 100% at the 150 kilowatt DC fast charger and headed east. We stopped at Ravensthorpe and topped up at the DC fast charger, though it could only pump out 20 kilowatts, so it wasn't exactly fast. I suspect it is connected to 3-phase. We rolled in Esperance and checked into a motel and plugged into the Tesla destination charger there. The next day we ventured off on a day trip to the Cape Le Grand National Park. Climbing the granite rocks was a treat. Then we headed off to the beaches, which were magnificent. The sand was so white. Part 2 of our Sydney to Western Australia trip saw us travel from Kalgoorlie to Perth and then anti-clockwise around the bottom part of Western Australia, covering 2,200 kilometres. We averaged 171 watt-hours per kilometre. Cost of electricity was $125. In the next video, we'll be leaving Western Australia and heading eastwards home to Sydney. We'll be travelling through the outback and crossing the Nullarbor Plain. Join me on the next video.